Welcome to Big Stuff Podcast. Kevin Brockway from CNHI Sports Indiana with Elton Hayes from CNHI Sports Pennsylvania. And Elton, this week, the Big Ten remaining strong. You've got 12 teams that are still in the top 51 in the NCAA net rankings. 12 teams that are projected to make the NCAA tournament, which is pretty incredible at this stage. I still think that number will whittle down between now and Selection Sunday. But you still have a lot of, formidable teams, certainly led by Michigan State and Maryland. And now Ohio State is bouncing back a little bit. You've got Iowa and, of course, Penn State and Rutgers, the two non-traditional powers that are there. And Elton, how do you kind of foresee this month shaping up in terms of some of the, contenders separating themselves from the pretenders?
Well, I think Purdue's a team that we have to keep an eye on. They're 9-2 at home right now, 12-10 overall. They're on a one-game win streak. I think Purdue could really make a push to elevate itself to just at the second tier of Big Ten teams. Indiana, after a brutal week last week, you and I both had heard from head coach Archie Miller about just playing the amount of games. I believe it's 3 games, 2 against ranked opponents in a row. Before getting a little respite here early this week. I think Indiana will have another chance to go on another run. Wisconsin's making some noise. 13-9 right now. Had a big win against Michigan State. The team that's really surprised me is Illinois right now. 6-6. 12-1 at home, 4-4 on the road, 8-3 in Big Ten play. I think we've got about 5 or 6 teams right now that are legit, tournament contenders, and I think you've got another maybe 4 or 5 of them that are just a cut below. But needless to say, it's been a very exciting season so far. The Big Ten has really outdone itself this year in terms of parity. It has really established itself as the class of conference. It's really established itself as the class of college basketball.
Yeah, and you touch on certainly Purdue. I think this is an interesting week for them because they host Iowa on Wednesday, and we're going to have Mark Emmert on later. Not to be confused with the NC president Mark Emmert. He covers Iowa for the Des Moines Register. And Iowa is a team. Luka Garza is leading the Big Ten in scoring at 23 points a game, really having a Carson Edwards type season from last year. And that's a guy that, Purdue misses offensively. They're a team that's really struggled to score the ball this year. But they may have found themselves in that comeback against Northwestern. I mean, they were dead in the water in that game, down 10 in the second half, down 8 with about 2.5 minutes remaining. And if they had lost that game, I think their NCAA tournament hopes would have been done. That would have been a loss that would have been, too hard to come back from. But, they found a way to win that game. And you got to wonder, going back to Mackey Arena, and then you get your rival Indiana at Assembly Hall at the end of the week. If they could somehow pull those 2 games off, they're going to be right back in the mix. So I think this shapes up to be as you said, a huge weekend for the Boilermakers. And Matt Painter's record in February is fairly strong. His teams have a track record of getting better as the season goes on. Guys are starting to define their roles, and I think this could be a week for them to make a move.
Yeah. Well, you've talked about Painter before. You talked about his longevity in the league and just his team's trying to, get better toward the end of the season and really catch fire. And we're starting to see that. Heading over to, playing Iowa this week, tomorrow actually at the Mackey Arena will be a good test to see where this Purdue squad really is. Iowa is playing some of the hottest basketball in the conference right now. You mentioned Luka Garza, the 6'11" senior. He scored 25 points on Sunday to lift Iowa past Illinois. Interestingly enough, that win snapped the 7-game Illinois win streak and propelled the Hawkeyes to number 17 in the latest AP poll. But we'll see how they fare against Luka Garza. He's averaging 23 points and 10.2 rebounds this season. He's got 16 games now this year where he's recorded 20 or more points. So, like I said, it'll be a very interesting matchup tomorrow. There's some good games in the Big Ten this week, but I think a lot of eyes will be on that Hawkeyes Boilermaker showdown there in Indiana tomorrow.
Yeah, it's certainly, I think a big chance for Purdue. And then, on the Indiana side, having that week off and, I watched them against Ohio State, and they looked like a team that really lacked energy. Archie Miller's concerned about the physicality right now. I mean, they were out-rebounded against Ohio State. It's the first time they'd been out-rebounded in 3 weeks, and they were just not going after balls. Crisply. They had about 5 or 6 that they fumbled out of bounds in that game. They also had 9 turnovers in the first half. They're a little disjointed right now offensively. So maybe this break for Indiana comes at a good time this week in terms of, them, getting their legs back a little bit and also maybe just kind of refocusing and trying to, work on some things offensively with their efficiency. They looked so efficient in the Maryland game. And then they took a huge step backward last week with how they played offensively against Penn State and offensively against Ohio State. And maybe some of that was being on the road, but, in neither game they could crack 60 points.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of that could be attributed to just the fatigue factor. I know last week we spoke with Pat Chambers. Penn State was about to end a week-long break. And he said, while it wasn't ideal, for a team playing with momentum as Penn State was, he was thankful for it because it kind of presented an opportunity for his players to get some rest. And, they came off of that and that 7-day break and held Indiana to a season low 49 points. But no, I think what you're seeing, like I said, is the result of just playing that competing schedule. Before Indiana went on that 3-game losing streak, it had won 4 out of the last 5 games. And then, it began that stretch by playing Michigan State, Maryland, Penn State, 3 consecutive games against ranked opponents, 2 of them on the road. And then, they got a little reprieve. They got Purdue tomorrow, and then, they turn right around and play number 17 Iowa. So, hey, this they say adversity is good for resilience. I think we're going to see if Miller can kind of channel that with this team. But I'm not going to be that down on Indiana right now and the fall that it's taken, just because, like I said, when we point to that stretch of games that it just played, it's kind of understandable.
Yeah, and, another team that, was in need of a bounce-back win was, Michigan going into Madison Square Garden and beating Rutgers. And the return of Xavier Simpson obviously helped. His 14th career game with 10 assists or more and averaging 8.4 assists per game. They really need him, like I said, to come up big in the second half of the season for them to make a run and secure an NCAA tournament bid.
They do. They've got some help from John Teske. He's averaging 13.6 points and 7.6 rebounds per game. But like you said, a guy like Xavier Simpson's impact on the game can't be understated. 8.4 rebounds per game. And, like you said, playing Rutgers is not an easy task. Thankfully, they were able to get it done at Madison Square Garden and not the rack. But, hey, a win is a win. That's good for momentum for Michigan. And I think Michigan's kind of established or kind of played itself back into the tournament conversation again. A good quad 1 win there. And, they've got Ohio State coming up here tonight, actually, at home. So we'll see if they can parlay that good fortune from that weekend win in New York City, to 2 in a row. Actually, to 3 in a row, because they did beat Nebraska again on January 28th.
And now another big week for Penn State. They stay in the top 25 this week. They're number 22, I believe. And, you've got, you're at Michigan State, which is obviously a tremendously tough place to play in East Lansing, and then returning home to face Minnesota this week. How important is it for the Nittany Lions to kind of keep up the momentum, and what's the tone like? Does Pat Chambers feel like he's got this team back on the right track after that 3-game losing streak in January?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because we had our media availability with him yesterday, and I asked him specifically, after they dropped the 3rd game in a row, last month, he was talking about, he didn't think that they played well with the target on their backs. So I asked him yesterday, now that you're back in the top 25, you're at number 22 now, what are you going to do differently? Are you going to approach it differently at all? And he said no. He said that he didn't think they handled that playing with that ranking well the first go around, having that target on their back. And they're just going to take a game at each time and try to play the best basketball that he believes that they're capable of playing. That starts from his coaching to the players. But one thing he also mentioned that I thought was very interesting was, he's telling the players to enjoy every minute of it. Don't get so wrapped up into the hype, into the ranking. Just, you're playing basketball. It's a special point in your life. Go out there and have fun. And just soak in the whole experience. But, we'll see what happens tonight. They're going to get a steep challenge from Michigan State playing there at the Breslin Center in East Lansing, going up against Cassius Winston, Xavier Tillman. But, hey, man, they've won 4 games in a row right now. They are 6-4 in Big Ten. I'm sorry, 7-4 in Big Ten play. And they've got they can get past Michigan State. I think there's a very favorable, very favorable potential for them heading into Saturday's matchup against Minnesota.
Yep, and a big week for Maryland, too. They host Rutgers and then go to Illinois. This is really a chance for Maryland to, put themselves on the upper echelon. And, Anthony Cowan was named Big Ten Player of the Week, 31 points and 8 assists. Hard to do much better than that, right, in a game against Iowa. But Cowan and Jalen Smith, obviously, are 2 guys that can, really carry you a long way, and both of them are stepping up at the right time.
They are, and Jalen Smith has really, really stepped up as of late. I know we had kind of talked about what's wrong with Maryland a couple weeks ago, and, we mentioned Jalen Smith kind of not really, taking that step forward at that point of the season, but he's really proved us wrong right now. The combination of him and Cowan has just been deadly. Smith averaging 15.3 points per game, 9.8 rebounds, and he just played a really instrumental role in that home win against Iowa last week, and just really shows you Maryland's potential of what they're capable of when they're getting contributions across the court.
Well, we'll see if the Terrapins can keep it up. And as I mentioned before, coming up, we're going to have Mark Emmert on to discuss Iowa and whether they can make a move in the Big Ten standings. This is Kevin Brockway from CNHI Sports Indiana with Elton Hayes from CNHI Sports Pennsylvania on the Big Stuff Podcast. Welcome back to the Big Stuff Podcast. Kevin Brockway from CNHI Sports Indiana with Elton Hayes from CNHI Sports Pennsylvania. Our next guest, and we promise I know it's going to be a crazy day in his home state, so we promise, not to throw in any caucus jokes, but the one crazy, the one thing, people are excited about in Iowa is certainly their basketball team. The Iowa Hawkeyes, ranked number 17 this week in the AP poll, playing an exciting brand of basketball, leading the Big Ten in scoring. And here to talk about it, as we said before, he's not the president of the NCAA, but he does share his name. He does an excellent job covering the University of Iowa for the Des Moines Register. Mark Emmert. Mark, pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, it's good to be here. How are you guys?
Good. We're both hanging in there, and certainly an interesting season for Iowa under Fran McCaffery. There's so many talented teams in this league, as 12 in the net, top 51, but Iowa is certainly interesting in the way they get up and down the floor and score the basketball under Fran McCaffery. And I'm curious, let's begin with Luka Garza, because here's a guy that's stayed on campus and developed. Mark, how much did you see this season from him coming, and what has he done in the 3 years to become really a more well-rounded and polished offensive player?
Yeah, I don't think anybody saw this coming. I guess his father told me that he did, but you would expect that from his father. But I did a big profile of Luka last week. They ran in the Sunday paper, and I was just talking to even like Jay Billis's, people around the country that follow basketball. Nobody saw. He was a 13-point-a-game guy last year, really good player, solid player, not even all Big Ten. And to do what he's doing now, where he's averaging 23 and 11, and pretty much doing it every night. Maybe the best player in the country right now. That's just a remarkable leap. Very, a testament to his hard work. He's just one of the hardest working people I've ever been around. If you talk about his off-season workout regimen, he actually went to California for 10 days workout. His grandfather coaches up there. It's some really intense workouts. They went over to Bosnia for another couple of weeks in August because he's got a lot of family over there that are professional players. His mother's from there. His uncle was a very famous professional player over there for years. The stuff they did was nuts. To get him in shape, also to improve his offensive arsenal, and you can see that paying off this year. I think we might have seen a little bit more of it last year, but I'm not sure if you guys remember this, but right before the season began last year, as sophomore year, yeah, he had surgery. He had a 9-pound cyst in his abdomen that needed to be pulled out of there, and it happened like in September, right before we were going to start beginning, their training for the season. And he didn't miss any games at the outset of the season for that, but obviously he was not himself for much of that season. So, according to his father, a lot of this might have happened last year without that surgery. Then he also had a sprained ankle in December that kept him out of a couple of games. So maybe it was coming a little bit and we just didn't know it. But I really do think it's one of the great stories in college basketball that I've ever been around. I've never seen anybody that basically just worked himself into a position where he's one of the best players in the country.
Teams that have had success defending him have done what, Mark?
The only way is to get him in foul trouble. He's been in double figures every game but one this season. He's been in 20 points or more the last 7 games. He is so good at just finding a way to get his points no matter what, because obviously they run the offense through him quite a bit. But if you look at the last game against Illinois on Sunday, he stepped out and hit 4 3-pointers. They were really clogging the lane on him. Obviously, Kofi Coburn is a handful in there at 7 feet tall. So he said, you know what, I'm going to go out and set a career high for 3-pointers this game to make sure I get my 25 points. He'll get to the free throw line if his shot's not falling. He's got a really nice face-up game this year. He's just a terror on the offensive boards. The teams that have really thrown the most triple teams at him are Nebraska and Wisconsin. And it worked to an extent. Obviously, if you got 3 guys covering him, it's going to be pretty tough. But then he went and got 6 offensive rebounds in each of those games, still ended up with 21 points apiece. So I haven't really seen anybody have any success against him. He really feels like he can't be guarded this year. But probably the worst recent game he had was at Maryland when they got beat there Thursday, and he was a little bit in foul trouble there. And it's very well known that if a Fran McCaffrey player gets 2 fouls in the first half, he will sit him for the rest of the half. And that's what happened to Luka. He had 2 in the first 5 minutes and sat most of the rest of that first half. So obviously that limited him a little bit. But he still ended up with over 20 points.
Hey, Mark. This is Elton Hayes. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Luka, and rightfully so, gets a lot of attention for this program. But a guy that's really popped up my radar is Joe Wieskamp, sophomore guard. 6'6", 205 pounds. It seems like he can do it all. He's shooting, he's averaging 15.1 points per game right now, 6.2 rebounds. How have you seen him develop here in year 2, and do you think he's hit his potential?
Yeah, obviously he was the guy that was getting most of the attention coming into the season for Iowa. He was all Big Ten. I had him on my all Big Ten team preseason. He's a guy that I know NBA scouts are looking at. They're not really looking at Garza, honestly, as an NBA prospect. But he is the guy. He's the top recruit that Fran has had here in many years. Fran McCaffrey, he's an Iowa kid, so they love him here. Really, really quiet kid. I will say this: he can sometimes disappear from games. He's got to be a little more aggressive at times. But you're right. He's an elite scorer at every level. He's a very good defensive rebounder. He's actually a much better defender than he gets credit for at his size. We've seen him block a lot of shots at the 3-point arc where guys are just surprised that he gets out there that quickly. They assume they have a shot and suddenly that Wieskamp is just filling it up. So he's got a really great wingspan. He's a premier athlete, and I think we all assumed this was going to be his team coming into this season. Garza just kind of taken that over, but you're right. He's a very good complement to Garza because he opens up space for each other. I mean, honestly, when they're both going well, it's really tough to try to decide how you want to defend Iowa. So he has been much better in Big Ten play. He had a little bit quiet non-conference season, but there are still moments when you wonder kind of where Joe Wieskamp is on the court.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I've covered Penn State. This is my first basketball season covering them. I think I came at the right time. The Big Ten, 16-5 overall, 22 in the country right now.
Right.
One thing that I've noticed with this Penn State team this year is that it's got a lot of timely contributions from its bench. Guys like, Miles Dredd. They're even pulling Mike Watkins off the bench now that John Harris starting at center. In your experience covering this league, how would you say this Penn State team looks this year, and what do you think its potential is in terms of, nationally?
Yeah, that's great. I was actually at the Pluster there for that game last month, and that's probably why you think so highly of Wieskamp, because that was one of his best games ever. But yeah, Penn State's very impressive. I thought they're so deep this year that we haven't really seen them. Obviously, they got some high-end talent there as well, in Lamar Stevens, but they've got a lot of guys. I mean, there were 2 or 3 guys that came off the bench that really killed Iowa in that game. So I think if you look at the Big Ten, here's how I'm looking at it this year. It's so great to cover because teams that have traditionally not been good or not good recently are suddenly really, really good. Illinois, kind of coming out of nowhere. Iowa, I think, has been a big surprise. A lot of people, Penn State and Rutgers, both now finally very relevant and very much in the mix for the top half of this league. That's great because in the past it's been Michigan State, Michigan. It's been kind of the same old Ohio State every once in a while. But to have so many good kind of fresh blood, really good coaches, really good programs, I think it's good for the league. And you're seeing it play out night in and night out. I mean, there's no easy games anymore. And if they get 11 teams in the Big Ten in the NCAA tournament, that'll be, I think, warranted. I really do think they deserve that. Penn State being one of them.
Thank you.
Mark, we certainly know Iowa can score. There's no doubt about that. But I know all season Fran McCaffrey has been demanding for better defense. Where do you feel like this team is now defensively, and what are they going to have to do between now and March to be a more complete team, to be a team that could, make a run by shutting teams down when their shots aren't falling?
Yeah, it has improved this year. You can definitely tell that. I think part of it is because the same 5-6 guys have to play together all the time. They don't have much depth here, so you're not really running guys in and out. And I think that's been a problem here in the past where just different combinations in the court. They're just not used to playing together at the same time, which really shows up on the defensive end, as you know, more often than on the offensive end. So they don't have a lot of elite perimeter defenders, although Joe Toussaint has really helped them there. The point guard, C.J. Frederick, is a very good defensive guard as well. But it really just comes down to playing, fundamental team defense. Make sure you get to clean up the defensive glass when you do get stops. And they have been really good at times, especially down the stretch of games. Here at home, the last 4 games, they've rallied in the second half of each game, and each game they've ended with 17-3 runs where they just get every stop they need when they need it. So at times they can look really good. They look terrible at Michigan. They have 103 points up there. They look terrible at home against DePaul. And I think really the knock on the McCaffrey defense is that it's just kind of spotty. I mean, you just don't know when it's going to be good and when it's going to be bad. And I don't think that's necessarily been solved this year. I mean, this is still a team that wants to beat you by scoring 85 points, but it has been better. I think it's tougher this year, a little bit tougher, a little bit more determined on that end of the court.
Well, Mark, we certainly appreciate your time. And like I said, so many, strong teams in this league, and I think certainly Iowa will be in the mix before it's all said and done.
Yeah, I agree. They're looking good so far, so it should be a good game tomorrow.
That's right. They get Purdue tomorrow, and they'll come back to the Hoosier State to get Indiana later this month as well.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, has there been a distinguishable split in terms of how they play defensively on the road compared to home? Most teams, I guess, play with a little more energy, or how would you say that is shaped up?
Yeah, it looks better at home, certainly. But I will say this, it's never looked good at Purdue that I've ever seen. I don't think I've ever covered a competitive game there. It seems like they get run out of that building every time. So I'll be curious to see if this year might be a little bit different because, I'm not kidding. I don't think I've seen Iowa stay within 20 of Purdue in the last 4 or 5 years over there. And they've really gotten torched at times. Of course, obviously Purdue does not have the same personnel it's had in the past, but I do think that building is worth probably 15 points. So this is a really big challenge for Iowa. I'm really kind of curious to see how they respond if this year's team is actually made up of a little bit different, inner strength.
Yeah, no question. And Purdue 9-2 in Mackey this year. They have lost to Texas and Illinois, but that's still a tremendously tough building for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, Mark. Hey, well, we greatly appreciate your time. And for the Big Stuff Podcast, this is Kevin Brockway from CNHI Sports Indiana with Elton Hayes from CNHI Sports Pennsylvania, signing off.